Hello, I'm Michael Pierce, and this is The Human Condition. Our topic today is light biology and circadian rhythms. The reason that I'm wearing red glasses today is to protect myself. Protect myself from what? Well, right up there is a really bright light that I use for the studio so that I can talk to you. And unfortunately, it's full of blue light. That wouldn't be such a problem if it was noon. Because it's not noon for me right now, I've got this blue light blasting me, and I need to protect myself from all that blue light, which I'll explain in a minute. The idea of light biology and circadian rhythm is the hottest topic across alternative medicine. This light biology, this new science that everyone's talking about, is really old. The first really big aspects of it came around in the 1950s, and it was exploding ever since. The day-night cycle affects everything in biology, including hormones and neurology, and it was covered up by public agencies and government. So let's get into it. My glasses protect me from this blue light because it isn't noon. And normally, there's a spectrum of light that takes place throughout the different times of day. And the light in the morning and the light in the evening is kind of similar, but the light at noon, at the peak of the sunlight during most of the Earth, is going to have the largest amount of blue light in it. Certainly there will be a blue light in the morning too, but most of that blue light will occur around noon or close to noon. So if I'm in Denver and I'm trying to make sure that I'm healthy, then I don't want in the evening or the early morning to be exposed to massive amounts of blue light without infrared light, which would normally be bathing me and you outside if we were outside. So what I've got to do is I've got to realize that my lights have a different spectrum. So what is the spectrum supposed to be? Well, normally there's a tremendous amount of infrared light at all times. Infrared light surrounds us, and it's got a broad spectrum, and it's the largest part of what we would be exposed to. It's the light that we considered red in color, or sometimes it's so low in frequency that we can't even see it. It's invisible. It's the heat that we feel that crackles off of a fire or off of an old incandescent light bulb when we warm ourselves by a light bulb. And that's the warmth rays that we feel when light emits warmth. Higher frequencies don't emit warmth. You don't feel or see or in any way perceive warmth from the lights. And that really is the spectrum that's, green and blue and yellow, and these colors don't give off in the visible spectrum, they don't give off heat. Then when we get to the highest range, which is the ultraviolet range, and above that is X-rays, the ultraviolet also doesn't give off heat that we can usually feel. Now it can burn our skin, but it doesn't give off the perception of heat, but it can burn our skin. Now the really funny thing about this is if we get enough infrared light and enough saturated fat, we can tolerate a lot more ultraviolet light without burning our skin. So it's very strange that someone as white as me, for example, could get more sun and be able to handle more sun and get more of a tan and handle more light without burning from the sun, as long as I got protected from the UV by the infrared, the low frequencies. So that gets back to my glasses. I'm sitting here in a room that's full of lights. Now, I've taken care of all my lights to make sure that they're more in the red spectra and they're not going to damage me. Except I've got a couple of them that are really bright and they're not changeable. You can't change them. They're blue lights and they dominate in the blue light spectrum. So if I don't want to mess up my own hormones and mess up my own brain, I need to wear blue blocking glasses. So these are $19 glasses. The brand doesn't matter because there's a million of them out there. But the general idea is that I can't see blue. Now you guys know that I'm holding up one of these as blue, and I can't see that blue through my glasses. It just looks kind of gray or dark. And I can't see blue in any of the lights. The flashing lights on my microphone, the flashing lights in different parts of my room, some of them are blue and I don't see them as blue. They're either completely blocked or they're made into a gray type color. So that protects me from those blue lights. So let's get into what goes on with all this stuff. This work that I'm trying to faithfully communicate, really, I discovered it through reading originally in my youth. I read Robert O. Becker's books. The Body Electric and Cross Currents are two books that he wrote, and they weren't really talking as much about light as they were talking about electromagnetic fields and electric currents, because back then, decades ago, the book was studying essentially how broken bones heal and how some animals can regrow their limbs. You may have studied that salamanders and other animals like starfish, if something rips off their limbs or rips off their tail, they can grow a new arm or a new leg or a new limb or a new star arm if they're a starfish, and they don't really think about it. It's not a big deal. They just do it naturally and they grow the whole thing. We can cut our fingernails and grow them back, but we can't cut our fingers off and grow them back. So why is it that we can't do it, but they can? And it turns out that there's a different thing called the current of injury. And Becker discovered this in doing research for the US government and for universities when he was doing his work. And he discovered that if you could induce a small electrical direct current in the area of injury when you amputated or cut off a finger or an arm or a leg or a tail in certain animals, that if they weren't supposed to grow back that limb, that they could grow it back. And in fact, that was some of the major discoveries. And then Dr. Becker went on TV way back in decades ago and told the story about how dangerous electromagnetic fields would be for people. Just as they could be beneficial, they could be harmful. And he was roundly canceled after that. So he lost his funding, he lost his career, and he lost his ability to continue doing the research he was doing. Well, that work was continued by Dr. Marino and continued by Alexis Cowan and Jack Cruz and a number of other people who I've been studying. And I probably won't get this completely right, but I'm trying to give you a faithful representation of a short version for a layperson of what you might want to understand regarding light. And we'll get to electromagnetic fields later, but today we're going to talk mostly about light. So it turns out that there is a light spectrum at different times of day. I talked about it, and generally it's quite spread out, and you've got all kinds of light: visible light, ultraviolet light, infrared light in the morning and at night, but you've got that big blue spike or peak around noontime. Now, artificial lights have been getting worse and worse for us in that they have more and more of a blue light spike, especially in the LED lights. Our computer screens are bad for this, our phone screens are bad for this, but the light bulbs and the LED lights are some of the worst. So we've been getting bathed in progressively more and more blue light, and you'd think, well, what is the difference? Blue light, you don't feel a damage, it doesn't hurt you, it doesn't burn you. What's the problem? Well, this blue light that's artificially produced by all these lamps stimulates something called a blue light chromatophore. And we've got those in our retinas, in the back of our eyes. We've got them in our skin. And they are something that is subject to this blue light. So we can, in fact, even while I wear these glasses, I have to realize that I could be exposed to blue light that is still penetrating my skin. So this is not enough of a mitigation. It's not enough. So you really would need to make sure you get enough sunlight, which I'm working on, to make sure that you get enough infrared to counteract all that blue light, or that you block the light. So we want to go through our houses and we want to get rid of some of these light bulbs that are full of blue light and go back to the old incandescents. Oh yeah, they've been outlawed, haven't they? Well, we're going to have to revolt. We're going to have to say no. We're going to have to buy decorative bulbs, which are still available. And we're going to have to change the laws because there are increased rates of cancers, there are increased rates of diabetes caused by this blue light. And there's new research that shows that this blue light is very, very damaging to human beings. So in the old days, fire and light bulbs were pretty similar in that they both emitted a lot of heat and a lot of infrared light. And that was beneficial to us, almost like a lizard in a tank that's just basking in the glow of the wonderful heat lamp. So it's more than just heat. It's not just heat. It's the fact that this infrared light penetrates through our entire bodies, goes through our skull, goes into our brain, goes all the way through to our bones and nourishes every organ in our body. Now, ultraviolet light doesn't do that. It only penetrates the superficial layers of the skin and goes into our eyes. But that also does something very important. So the UV makes vitamins like vitamin D and helps us produce hormones when it goes into our eyes. It helps us produce a hormone cascade called the POMC pathway that goes through and becomes adrenocorticotropic hormone, ACTH, and ultimately the beta endorphins. And so that's important in your hormone production as well as your control of pain and cancer and all these regulatory top-down effects that go from our brain to our body and tell us what we should be doing and in what time. The problem is progressively there have been laws that have been enacted that ban the use of infrared lights because of presumably the heat and the waste of energy, and that's going to contribute to global warming. The problem is that only about 6% of the energy that's consumed is made by domestic lighting. So it really doesn't contribute that much. And in fact, it contributes so much to the cost of healthcare that it would be cost effective for us to go back to infrared lights. So we really need to go back to infrared lights that have wasteful heat and have more red lighting in our homes and in our offices. This has been studied in all kinds of places, in London, in the ophthalmic division of the university. This is really an important aspect that's been studied all over the world. And in fact, we make vitamin A from infrared light, we make vitamin D from UV light, and this is a really, really significant thing for us. What you also need to know is that if you just get exposure to natural light, which we all love, you love to go into a building in the workplace or a library or your own home, if you're wealthy enough to have a home that's just lit with, skylights and big, big, beautiful windows. The problem is auto glass in cars and window glass in domestic homes and in offices are all blocking both UV and infrared light. So you really don't get the benefit. You have to go outside. There are some studies that show that some of this can be offset in awful buildings where you're forced to be under blue light all day. Not only would you want to get some glasses like this that are blue blocking, but you also might want to have yourself exposed to infrared lamps or banks of lamps that could offset some of that blue light. So if you work in a horrible place where nobody listens to you and you can't do anything about it, consider surrounding yourself with some home-bought red lights. And I'm not going to go over all of the buying procedures. There's a bunch of videos out there on YouTube right now that talk about how to buy good red lights that are inexpensive and good red lights that are expensive, and how to avoid the scams and the bad ones, and to just get infrared light and not all the blue light and not all the other types of bad light, if you will, that's unbalanced when it comes out of the bulbs. So you can get banks of them that are many little bulbs. You can get an old-fashioned incandescent big old glass bulb. There's many ways you can do this. You can get helmets that you wear on your head. You can get lamps that are near you that shine right on you. You can get mattress covers that you lay on, or sleeping bags that you lay on, and this light will help to offset some of the blue light. So if a person is trying to deal with this, we have to deal with legislation, and we have to deal with our own personal lives. We have to do things to deal with this exposure. The most important thing is the free thing, which is go out in the sun. Not necessarily go out in a ton of UV light, but white-skinned people can often get enough UV light in about 15 minutes if there's enough UV light in the sky, especially at noon. What's really difficult to get is enough infrared light. So that means going out under a canopy, maybe even wearing clothes, having indirect light that bounces off of paint, off of walls, off of trees, off of grass. That is still very beneficial and effective infrared light. And that's the light that really feeds our mitochondria. That light goes in and feeds our mitochondria and allows our mitochondria to efficiently produce energy, which is that ATP molecule that some of you have heard about, adenosine triphosphate. That's the energy molecule that we use. It's like a little lump of coal, and we burn it to make energy inside our cells. The problem is, if you get too much blue light and green light, you might feel better. You might have your pain reduced. You might even have a chiropractor shining a laser at you with blue and green light, and that can be really good for your pain and really good for your healing. However, if you do that chronically and long term without enough of the red light, you might discover that your body produces enough energy, enough ATP, but it also coincidentally produces reactive oxygen species, or ROS. And those reactive oxygen species are oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is what the old days we used to call free radicals. So now we've got to take supplements to offset the free radicals, and we don't have efficient fuel burning. So we make enough ATP, but we can't burn it efficiently because we've got all this reactive oxygen species circulating in our body, which is these abnormal oxygen molecules. This information about addiction and blue light was discovered in the 1950s, and it was applied in the failing Las Vegas casinos. The failing Las Vegas casinos were revived by painting the walls, painting the windows black, and putting all the blue light machines in there, and all the one-armed bandits, and pumping oxygen in for people so they could stay alert longer, and not letting them go outside, and trying to serve them food, and the buffets evolved from that so they could keep people in the casinos for longer. This work has been described in great detail by Jack Kruse in a historical perspective. He's a neurosurgeon, but he's really a great historian. And Alexis Cowan, once again, I want to introduce because I'm a member of her Undoctrinated group, and I think you should join that too. It's a fantastic show that goes through and talks about how light biology works and does a much more detailed job than I'm doing here today. So we've got to do something to mitigate our blue screens. We've got to buy or use software and nightlight software and iris software to get our screens to be shifted toward orange and red and away from blue, especially at night when we're sleeping and when we're getting up and we're doom scrolling on our phones. We really don't want to do that. We want to either cover our lamps with some kind of plastic sheeting that's red, or wear some kind of plastic sheeting like this, or get some blue blockers. We want to change all our bulbs in our ceilings and in our lamps, try to go back to the decorative infrared bulbs. We want to go outside and get infrared exposure. We want to be able to get that light and heat. And in fact, some of this emerged into other medicine that was circadian in nature that had to do with cold plunges, which doesn't seem to have much to do with light, but it does. You know, the whiter your skin and the more your heritage evolved from northern latitudes, the more you do benefit from cold plunges. The darker your skin, the more you benefit from just lots of time and lots of skin exposure. So as much bare skin as possible for as many hours as possible exposed to the sun if you're at a low latitude. You know, you're close to the equator and your skin is very dark. So just consider these ideas. These are things that might be very important for us at preventing future cancers, at looking at diabetes prevention, at reversing very strange and odd diseases and endocrine diseases, normalizing our hormones, normalizing our neurotransmitters, and reversing some of the horrible chronic disease that we have in this world. I want to end on talking about the fact that there are government agencies that are trying to block the sun. And it's very important to not let that happen. There are entities that want to do either satellites or cloud treatments that block the sun from individuals and from human beings and from animals and from crops and from land. And I think it's very important to study that and look into that, because I think you'll find that it's going to be one of the most devastating things with the most side effects ever. We need to have sunlight and we need to have that natural exposure.